The demonstrator for this video is not wearing a respirator and safety glasses to facilitate the production of this video. Whenever working with chemicals or performing any activity that disturbs paint on a structure built prior to 1978, it is important to always wear proper safety equipment, to lay out adequate protection to collect any debris that may be generated, and to prevent children, pets, and others from entering the work area.
Now that you have the sash out of the window, you have the opportunity to perform a few common maintenance items. One of the most common is the replacement of the glazing here. And as you can see, the glazing on this window has failed pretty significantly. This is you definitely want to replace all this glazing so that it's forming a nice tight weather seal. Another common reason for replacing the glazing is because you've got a broken window. There's a few different methods for removing the glazing. One of the most common methods for removing the glazing is going to be the heat gun. I like to use a variable temperature heat gun that allows me to keep the heat at a temperature below 1000 so I don't have to run to the risk of vaporizing the lead. Another common method is to utilize steam, which you can find online information about the removal of paint and glazing via steam, which is commonly used with either a professional steaming device or even a garment steamer. And the third option would be ultraviolet. There's a few different ultraviolet products that you can find online, and all these things have the same common factor of basically heating up the paint and the glazing to make them more pliable and easier to remove. I'm sure most of you who've tried to remove old glazing in the past have run into the problem that this stuff can be really hard after sitting in the windows for many years. So let's go ahead and move on to the demonstration of removal with the heat gun. This glazing itself is pretty tore up, so I might need the heat gun for some of it, and it might just kind of come off, as you see here, without too much work. Sometimes this stuff can just flake right off, and sometimes it can require an awful lot of work. So I have my heat gun set to a low, 850 degrees, and I keep it on the low setting so that the dust isn't getting blown around everywhere. And again, whenever you're working with anything dusty, it's a good idea to be wearing some sort of mask and to make sure that you have proper drop cloths around to collect everything that you're dropping. Whenever I'm removing glazing, I like to make sure, I prefer a nice stiff scraper, although some people do prefer a nice flexible one. And you're always going to want to make sure that you're pushing towards the wood, not pushing towards the glass, to help reduce the risk of breakage. Now oftentimes, and this is the top of the window, you'll find that along the bottom edge here, where moisture has a chance to sit and develop and the weather tends to beat down on it harder, you'll find that the glazing has degraded more. Whereas at the top part here, or even along the sides, it might be in pretty good shape. So it's perfectly okay if you've got just about a third of the glazing to replace, to go ahead and just replace that 1/3. Just dig out the parts that are bad and replace it in place. And you're not necessarily required to take out all of the glazing when you're redoing your windows. It's just okay to do spot repairs. So when you are taking out the glazing, you want to make sure that you're looking for the old glazing points. It's true that not all windows have them, but most do. And you want to make sure that you're keeping an eye out for them so that you're not putting undue pressure on the glass if you happen to hit up against one. A pretty common type is what you're seeing right here, and it's just this little piece of metal that sticks into the wood and also presses onto the glass and helps to hold the glass in place. I would say the most important trait to have whenever you're doing something like removing the glazing from windows is patience, because if you go too fast, you're certainly going to run into issues with cracking the glass and you're going to make a lot more mistakes. So I would say one of the best benefits of the hot air gun is that they're easy to find and relatively cheap. My personal preference, however, is for steam, because you can not only use the steam generator basically in the same way I'm doing here by directly applying steam to a limited area, but you can also build a steam box where you can place the whole window sash inside the box, let it steam for 20 minutes to half an hour, and that'll loosen up not only all the glazing but all the paint as well. And it's a good idea if you've got a lot of windows to do. If you find that you're starting to really lift up a lot of the wood, if you're digging into it too much, that means you're going against the grain, and you're going to want to turn around and start from the other edge. So now that we've got the glazing off, we've got a little bit of a mess here. That's when I'm going to break out my HEPA vac and make sure I'm always keeping everything nice and clean so they don't have a big dusty mess to deal with afterwards. So now that you've got the glazing out, you can definitely see those glazing points that I mentioned earlier. So I'd like to have some sort of small tool on hand, and if you can see this, there are these little metal points. Here's a good example of one. There we go. There's another. It doesn't hurt to sort of loosen up some of that extra putty that's in there. So when you see me putting pressure on this tool, I'm not pushing down against the glass. I'm trying to either pull down this way or push up this way to sort of rock these little points back and forth so that they kind of loosen up a little bit, and I can pull them out this way. So once you've got all the glazing points out, just go around the glass and really make sure that you got them all out. Nothing's going to break your heart worse than having a piece of glass snap after spending all this time working on it just because you missed one little piece of a glazing compound or a little point like this being stuck along an edge. Alright, so you've worked hard at it. Now the moment of truth. Let's try to get this piece of glass out of here without breaking it. I like to put my hands underneath the sash and sort of just gently press up, not really trying to loosen the whole thing up, just sort of testing the waters to see how tightly it's adhered to the glass. If you find one loose corner, like this is loose right here, you can just gently wiggle it and it'll break other pieces free as it comes up. And there you go. So before you put this back in, you're going to want to get rid of all this excess paint and whatever glazing compound might be left stuck to it. I like to use a straight razor. You can use one of these. Just go along here, scrape that off. As long as you get all the excess old material off of here, there's no need to, sand it to a perfect smooth. It just needs to be clean. And then once you're done with this, I like to apply a nice penetrating primer, oil-based, as we've done over here. So this is a rabbit that's been nicely cleaned up and has a primer applied. And this one's ready to have new glazing put in. So I like to use a product called Sarco. It's S-A-R-C-O Type M, which is multi-glaze. So depending on the air temperature outside, you might have to work this with your hands a little bit to really get it nice and pliable. To properly glaze a window, you're going to first lay down a bead of the glazing compound along the bottom side of the rabbet here, and the glass is going to sit on top of that. So this will act like a gasket between the wood and the glass, helps to reduce vibration and also helps to seal out the weather a little bit better. So I'll get my little string here, and everybody has their own particular way of applying the glazing. I'm not going to claim that my way is best. Do what feels right to you. If you like to roll out a whole long snake and apply it like that, that's fine. I like to just sort of smush it in place like this, because it's going to get pressed down by the glass later anyway, and it'll even itself out. So you've got your bed of glazing compound applied all the way around on a prime surface. You've got your piece of glass that you pulled out that's had all the excess stuff scraped off of it. So now we're going to press it onto the glazing compound. Now I try to keep my fingers on opposite sides of the glass, trying to help press this all down evenly. And what you can see that I'm doing here is if you can see through the glass, and you can see how the glazing compound is flattening out, making this nice tight seal. Alright, so these are the types of glazing points I'm going to come back with. You saw the kinds that we had before. So here is the old style and there is the new. They also do make these types of points still, so if you prefer these type you can get those. They also make triangle points. These are just happen to be my preference, so you can use your preference. And I press it into the wood, and I'm just trying to gently wiggle it back and forth while making sure that it stays nice and flat with the glass, so I'm not creating any sort of weird angle on it. So the 6 glazing points are in, 2 on the sides, 1 on the top, 1 on the bottom. Now what I like to do is flip it over so that you see what would be facing the inside portion. Here you can see where all that excess glazing putty pushed its way through to the inside. So before I start glazing the outside portion, I like to get my glazing tool in there and just cut all this loose so I can tell where the interior trim profile is. Now what that allows me to do by taking that off from this side is when I get over to this side, now I can see where the interior trim is. And I don't want my glazing compound to go past this, because then when you're in the inside, you'll see the glazing compound pushing out past the trim from the inside, and that won't look particularly good. You also don't want to be looking from the outside and see the interior trim showing before the glazing compound. So we've got the glass bedded, and we've got the glazing points in, and we've trimmed off the excess, so now we can see the inside trim. So now, and again, this is one of those things where there's a million different methods to do it, and some of the old timers can probably just do this really fast, but I'm going to show you how I do it, and you can make up your own mind about how you would like to do it. Basically what I'm doing right now is packing the joint with the glazing compound. Try not to get too crazy with it though. I want it to be pretty close to the amount that I want in there. Otherwise you're going to have a lot of excess to be scraping off. And then, to get your joint, you kind of start in the corner, press it on in, see how you did. And as you can see here, if I just left it like this, if you were sitting on the inside, you'd see this big line of putty, which would be really distracting, at least it would be to me. So you want to make sure that you're definitely in line with this interior trim here. So I'm going to make sure I peel this back a little bit more to make it nice and even. You don't see anything falling through there, and you don't see the trim when you look down through it through here. You can just got it nice, pretty much lined up right along with it, which is what you're looking for. So now I'm going to take care of the other three sides. Well, I hope this makes some of you do-it-yourselfers feel a little bit better, because there's some old-timers out there that could just whip that out in about a third or a fraction of the time that it just took me to do it. Probably looking a little bit smoother too. And I would definitely advocate for just an annual, if not twice annual, checkup of all the systems in your home. But if you walk along and you see things are starting to look, like this, and if you poke at it a little bit and find that things are just chipping right off, then you're going to want to tackle that. But if everything is looking nice and solid, like this little section right here where it's nice and soft, hard, you can just leave it. So it could be, especially on the sides of the house that get a lot more weather, it could be every, 5 to 6 years, and other parts of the house could be much longer than that. Well, here's a nice trick I learned for how to clean up the windows, because as you see, there's just all this putty grease all over it. You can spend some time with the chemical cleaner trying to get it off, and it still leaves a little bit of a haze, but this is whiting powder. You can get this at paint supply stores, some of them, or you can look for it online or hunt around a little bit. But I find, get a little bit here, you can actually just sort of dust off a lot of this oil. And you can do that without tearing apart all the glazing you just did. If you're using a brush, you can just sort of brush it onto the glazing a little bit as well, and on your pants. That's always good. I would follow this up with like some sort of glass cleaner to get the dust off, but it's a lot less work than trying to sit there and work all that grease off. So we've glazed the window, and you've let it cure for a little while. This particular glazing compound can be cured enough to paint within a few days to a week, a little times more depending on the weather outside. Other glazing compounds can take several weeks to cure up properly. The way you know that it's cured properly is when you go to feel it, and you can press your thumb to it and you don't leave any thumbprints. So you want to seal it first with a primer. Now, I know we used a penetrating primer on the Rabbit, but we're not going to want to use a penetrating primer on the glazing itself, because if it's as a penetrating primer, it's designed to go deeper in, and it'll start basically reactivating the glazing compound and can cause it to soften up again. But the trick here is that you want to get it on there, but you want to get it onto the glass just a fraction. I mean like 1/32 of an inch. Just a little hair onto the glass. And what is that doing? Well, this paint layer is going to combine with all these other paints, and it creates a single surface. So the glazing itself shouldn't be exposed too much to the weather. It's going to go from the glass to the paint to the rest of the surface, so that you're basically creating a nice little weather seal all the way around your glazing there. Oh, get that little spot off. I like to start at the top so that if there's any excess paint, it's over at the top and it's not all the way on the glass. Just put it along. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this video to be informative, and if you have any other questions about old windows, please contact historicdenver.org or the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Old windows are considered to be the eyes of a home, and by following these tips and techniques, you can ensure that they last for generations to come.